Okay, well, it is my pleasure today to say that we have Phil Escott, who is going to enlighten lots of us. And I know it's going to give so much inspiration to people to hear Phil's story. So thanks for coming on and joining us on Ancestral Health TV, Phil.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me, Dan. It's an honour.
I think you're really going to open people's minds up to what's possible in terms of health recovery today.
Well, we'll see. There's a lot of very knowledgeable people out there. So, a lot of people way ahead of me. The only difference is I kind of applied it to a real illness. So I've got the inside scoop on it as well. But yeah, I'll do my best.
Yeah, in a weird way, sometimes I wish that I could be unwell to some extent and apply all I know, because otherwise it's all kind of theoretical and you're applying it to other people and you're reliant on them implementing.
It's sort of frustrating in a way, because sometimes you really do know stuff. And I know it kind of sounds arrogant when you say, I really do know that this works. And people go, oh, yes, but there's loads of research to show the contrary, and there's loads of, and that's fine. And it's cool. And you can see how it came about. And some of this research is a bit dodgy, isn't it? And it's sponsored by the drug companies and sugar industry and whatever. So it's difficult to get across to that if somebody hasn't really been ill and then got better. And a lot of people, they get very ill and they do certain things that make them a little bit better, like I did, but I was never satisfied with that. I wanted to really fix it.
Yeah.
And so they sort of think, okay, well, I've had a little bit of improvement here, so this must be the way to go. When really it takes a bit of courage when you're sick to go down somewhere where you've had some improvements and then realize it's a bit of a dead end and you have to retrace your steps.
Yeah.
And, there was a time with me in my healing where I was absolutely desperate and really, really depressed. I thought I'd tried everything. I really did.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at a time when I'd been really down the whole raw vegan path, and I was juicing and I was doing nothing else. And it must be the most pure thing. Surely it must be. And, initially there's some results, and then it tailed off, and then it really got awful. And I thought I've run out of ideas. And I've been somebody who'd studied it for years and written a book, and I've been fascinated, and yet I was completely at a loss.
Yeah.
And then it was really just throwing out all of the dietary stuff and looking at sort of anthropology, really, ancestral stuff, because, the trials have gone on, haven't they? Yeah. Whole civilizations over millennia.
Yeah.
And when you start to think of it that way, you can really kind of start to ignore PubMed. And people get really cross with you when you think like that. But, we were, just before we came on, we were talking about Jack Kruse. And he's a tremendous character who's put a whole load of amazing things together. And a load of people think he's a nutter. And he's really not a nutter, because when you see the stuff that's coming out now, it's usually what Jack's talked about ages ago. And he's put together this stuff. But he knows how to interpret scientific data. And I'm sure even he says he's wrong sometimes. Of course he is. Everybody is. We're human. But a lot of people, they think it's science, but it isn't science. It's something they've seen in the Daily Mail or something like that. And so, it's not really anything to take much notice of. Whereas somebody who really understands about it can look at this stuff and then tie it in. But also, if they've got their eye on nature and the whole ancestral thing of how humans have developed, then you start to get to some real cool stuff.
Yeah, having that evolutionary perspective. But as you say, it takes a lot of understanding in order to keep that big picture in mind when other bits and pieces are all kind of distracting. And it is.
It's awful. That first day of Googling when you're sick. I mean, how chaotic is it? It's no wonder the GPs say don't Google.
Yeah.
Because somebody might do it for a day. If they're persistent, they might do it for a week. And if you do that, you haven't scratched the surface. You haven't even got through the bullshit.
Yeah.
There's nothing you're finding, and you're not seeing any way of discriminating between one thing and another.
Yeah.
And then I guess that you start to see a lot of stuff about veganism and whatever, and it's easy to go with that. And I'm sort of mentioning that because I've been under attack, as you can imagine. As somebody who has 100% carnivore diet, I have a lot of attacks from vegans and stuff. And it was something that I've been through as well. And it was really surprising to me when I did drop the veganism and went to, not carnivore, but very low carb, high fat kind of thing. And things really did start to improve. But then I started to look into the moral aspect of it, and it is quite extraordinary when you see that things are not quite what they seem. It's lovely, you know, and you go into veganism with a great heart and saving the animals and all that. But now I think, for a start, I think compassion is about accepting our essential nature, you know, accept loving what is, and it's accepting our essential nature. And we always have done that. I don't see vegans demonstrating in the Serengeti against lions, you know, doing that. But they say then they're built for it and we're not. And which is what I said in my book in '96, and I was wrong, because it's all about the different relative lengths of the gut. It's to do with the microbiome in there. You know, if you feed a gorilla ribeye steak, it's going to die. You know, eventually, it's not going to absorb it very well. But if we try and eat a gorilla diet, it's not going to work. You know, tons of grass every day, or bamboo, or whatever it is that they eat. So it is obvious from the Inuit and the Maasai and whatever that people have survived on it beautifully, and so we definitely are meat eaters. Okay, so accept that, and then you just do the least harm possible, because I think we're all against the factory farming thing, aren't we? It's horrendous. It doesn't do the animals any good. It doesn't do the people any good who eat it. It's the same old crops that the vegans eat, and those crops destroy the soil, displace millions of species, chew loads of creatures up in the combine harvesters. So there really is no diet without some environmental footprint.
Yeah.
And for me, I think the answer is probably, you know, rewilding the land, getting the big herds back on, and probably eating a load of insects as well, because there's too many of us on the planet. And I think the whole grain thing is definitely fueling the autoimmune thing. And having been on the receiving end of that, you kind of look at the whole thing of let's feed the world on grains and be compassionate as not compassionate to anybody, let alone humans. It's painful stuff. So yeah, it was a huge rethink I had to go through.
Sure. Yeah. So take us through your story. So how did you get through becoming unwell to then writing a book entitled How Arthritis Was the Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me?
Yeah. Well, around 2009, I realized that I was pretty fat. I mean, well, let's go back further, I suppose, to maybe the late 90s when I was running a gym here. I'd just written my first book. I was actually advocating vegetarianism. The book wasn't really on diet. It was more on training and this kind of breathing that you can do to lower the heart rate for cardio stuff. So there's not so much impact on it, and Ayurveda and lots of stuff about Ayurveda in there. I was very involved with the whole TM, the Transcendental Meditation movement up here in Skelmersdale where I live. And so I got kind of involved in the whole Ayurvedic thing. And anyway, so I went off into the gym, into running this gym and climbing wall I had in there. It was a great little place, you know. And I was exercising a lot. I was writing articles for mountain bike mags and doing loads of rides and training, you know, very abbreviated but very heavy, and putting a load of muscle on. I was an old geezer back then. In '97 I was still 35, and it was probably too late to put any serious muscle on, but with these abbreviated routines it was really quite spectacular what was happening. So anyway, I was kind of muscly, but I had a lot of aches and pains, and I could see some of this inflammation coming up, you know, particularly in the sacroiliacs, which is where a lot of these arthritic things start.
Yeah.
I didn't have any explanation for it at the time. There was no diagnosis. They'd look at stuff and say, oh, we don't really know. I mean, I could look at the diagnosis now with the high CRP and the high SED rates and all of that kind of thing, calcium flying around the blood. And it's kind of, I'm not a doctor and I'm not scientifically minded, but to me it's pretty obvious what was going on back then. But they don't really see that so much. So anyway, fast forward to, oh yes, so in the gym and doing all that exercise, I still never got lean. I was never fat, I was never overweight, but I didn't have a decent set of abs or anything. I was never ripped, and I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand how I could do all that exercise and nothing would happen. So anyway, fast forward to 2010, and we'd just come back from a holiday in Thailand. I'd been really fat. Well, not really fat. I was like, 14 stone, whatever that comes out as in pounds. So 14 and a half stone or whatever, but for my frame, well, I'm 5'10", my bones are pretty small, and it was pretty overweight. I felt pretty overweight, boiling hot all the time, inflamed, and you know, things were starting up. But then after this holiday in Thailand, we came back, and then one day one ankle just completely blew up, like it had had a really bad sprain. And then a couple of days later, the other one did, and then the left knee. And it was weird. It was just looking at this nightmare thing going on. And it's not just painful when you walk on it. That's excruciating, like there's broken glass in it. It was agony just to lie there, you know. It would just throb all the time, and then the wrist, the back, neck, hips, but mainly it was ankles and left knee. That was what was the really crippling thing, and also the whole systemic thing. I would get fevers, rashes. There was eczema, well, not eczema, but psoriasis, because it was psoriatic arthritis. They call it. It's very linked with psoriasis. There was 100 things, you know. About a year before, I'd been diagnosed with fatty liver and 2 cysts on the liver, cysts on the kidneys. I mean, all kinds of things were going wrong. It was arterial calcifications. Nothing that was actually felling me, you know. I felt quite kind of well on it, but aches and pains and pretty crap. But then at the end of 2010, it all went horribly wrong. And so I tried their drugs and whatever for a very short time. And I realized that this was not the way out. It was causing all sorts of chaos. You can't focus on the symptoms. You can't listen to them. You can't learn anything. Mm-hmm. And it creates other ones. You know, it's just bouncing stuff around. So then the journey started, really, of trying to discover what was going on. The only relief I really found at the start was fasting, and which is why it's always my first bit of advice to somebody, because I say, just if you're in pain with something inflammatory, just fast, do a water fast for 3 days, and you see those symptoms, they'll tail right off. I did so many fasts because I couldn't figure out how to eat, because all the dogma that I was listening to, whether conventional, which I didn't really listen to, or all the spiritual stuff, like you have to be veggie, you have to, and then that leads you sort of, oh, well, if I'm ill and I'm veggie, I must be even more veggie. So I have to have all the raw stuff, and I have to be a fruitarian, and I'm still in pain. I mean, certain things it did help with, because the grains had gone pretty much, but the pain was still there, the inflammation was still there. But it was to go down that whole sort of vegan route is you get a lot of muscle wastage. You know, I was finding that I was losing weight. I lost a ton of weight. I came down from, well, it was 14 3/4, so almost 15 stone, came down to about 10 stone, but I was still kind of skinny fat. And then came the time where I was properly desperate and didn't really understand where I could go next, and started looking at the whole anthropology thing and accepted about the meat and whatever. And so I started experimenting with that, and it was great. And I also started experimenting with cold thermogenesis and getting in those cold baths and not even changing the diet. I did end up really ripped, lying on the sofa doing nothing, whereas I'd exercised all those years. And I thought, hang on, now I'm stuffing myself with saturated fat, really stuffing. And I was really stuffing, I mean, really properly 4,000 calories a day or something, because I felt so starved from the raw veganism that I was just eating anything that would come along that was protein or fat, and getting in a cold bath. And the cold bath strips the fat off. It's incredible how it burns the fat. You know, the whole thing about it changing white adipose tissue to brown. And I could see this happening on me. And I thought, well, yeah, I've always wanted to be ripped, but I didn't really want to be ripped at 9 stone, which is like, what, 125 pounds for people in other money. And it was at 5'10", that was way too skinny. And it took me a long time to put everything back together, really, and get rid of the inflammation enough to be able to train again and put some of the muscle back on again. And yeah, eventually things came good. I mean, I'm 99% there. I still have things that I'd like to fix, you know. So there's a left quad that's a bit wasted from the time that the knee was inflamed for so long, and that's taking a while to build up. But hey, you know, it's just the recuperation phase. But the inflammation's down completely. And the whole process, I believe, has been stopped. There was a lot of other stuff to it. There's all the more subtle levels, you know, the emotional levels and things like that. Like a time where I completely healed my ankles from dealing with some emotional issue when the knee was still raging. Now, any rheumatologist will tell you that's impossible. I've never had the slightest problem in the ankles since. Do you know how I see it? I've got this weird view of autoimmunity and how it happens. I think that on a physical level, it's like our gut protects us from our emotions in a way. You know, we can be kind of messed up and have all sorts of odd hang-ups and false beliefs and traumas and whatever in our system, in our head. But it doesn't get into the physiology until the physiology is broken. Now, the physiology will be broken by the stress of having the traumas anyway, but it'll also be broken by artificial light, EMFs, you know, not sleeping, horrible relationships, grains, all of these things. So it's very difficult for somebody who's got this thing of looking for one cure for one disease to ever figure out the complexity of it. But when you can see the areas that the problems are in, it's not like, you see, the functional medicine thing is absolutely tailored for each person.
Yeah.
And that's great. But looking at it in that nebulous fashion for people who aren't really trained in it is very difficult, because they think, oh, where do I start? But actually, it's not that difficult when you see the different areas. You've got emotional, you've got light, you've got EMFs, you've got grounding, you know, you've got the diet, you've got all of these things. And you can see some people will have more imbalances in one than in another.
Yeah.
And so anyway, there was a load of other things that I did. And I see that now that how I see this funny picture of autoimmunity is when the gut breaks, you know, when it goes through and the proteins start going through from the food and the body starts reacting to it in the way that the doctors see it, and attacking our own tissues. At that point, we're like that expression that they say about bipolars, like everybody else, only more so. And I love that expression, because it's all, when you get autoimmune, it's like a sensitive instrument panel. And for me, all of the diet stuff, all of everything is just symptom control. Yeah. It's more on an emotional level where you kind of actually fix things, but it just means that it's up here as some little problem. But down here, once it gets into the physiology, like a rheumatologist will say, what you say to a rheumatologist, well, why did it go in that knee and not that knee? Oh, we don't know that. Well, to me, the only explanation is something emotional, where you can see that your main problem emotionally is usually your main physical symptom, and that's what it's attached to. And if you sort that out, you can feel the physical symptom draining away. But it might drain away to 10% or something from the diet and from other environmental factors. So then you can get a little bit of peace to then figure out the emotional side of it. Everything goes hand in hand. This is what I find is beautiful for me, and that's why the title of the book was that, because it took me to seeing that sort of circle of health that can't be broken on any part of it. If it does, then it's going to affect all the other ones. And, you know, you stick a pin in a tire at any point, the other side's going to deflate. Yeah. So, so that's kind of my story of what happened.
That's really interesting. And I completely resonate with that overarching view of health, of the physical, the emotional, spiritual, and the intertwine of all of them, and how, as you say, the more specific a diagnosis is, the more limited the progress you can make with it, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, yes.
Very limited. And the aim has always got to be to get someone healthy. And as you say, it's taking all those things into consideration in order to get them there, which is sometimes easier said than done. But for a man, you can talk from your own story about someone who's pushed through to make sure that you get to the root cause and leave no stone unturned, it sounds like.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm still finding stones. Yeah. We're always works in progress. This has become my life's passion now. So I'm incredibly fascinated with it all. And this recent stuff that's coming out about deuterium, this I love, that Jack's brought out. He brought my attention to it and loads of other people. But when you actually look at it, it explains pretty much why people are getting so much better on these very, very low carb diets, and even these meat only diets and things, because there's so much confusion in the diet world, because this person's saying this, that person's saying that. But But if you stop listening to them and take into account light cycles and deuterium, the whole diet thing makes sense suddenly. Because, you know, there's a little story which you've probably heard, but I think is great, which kind of explains how Mother Nature knows best. When the polar explorers would go up to sort of Inuit territory, and they die of scurvy a lot. Now, the Inuit never died of scurvy, and yet they didn't take in any vitamin C. Well, maybe a few berries in the spring or whatever, but generally they were on sort of 80% fat, 20% protein, and they weren't taking in any vitamin C. Why didn't they die? It's obviously our theories of vitamin C are wrong. The polar explorers packed rice and beans and things like that, and they died of scurvy. So the pathway of vitamin C, where it's just not really necessary in the absence of carbs. And the old ship's captains used to know this, apparently, you know, when they called the British limeys, because they give out lemons and limes and whatever to get rid of scurvy. Well, they were also knew that in the presence of, you know, if they were eating fresh meat, they didn't get any scurvy anyway. And so there's something else completely going on here. There's a different pathway. And you look at this, and there's so many myths are broken down. Like, even for somebody open-minded as me, who really is a rebel, and you know, I'll be rebelling against my parents and going vegetarian. I'll be rebelling against the TM movement now and eating 100% carnivore when all of them up here are still vegetarian. And some of them recoil in horror, of course, because they've been told by endless gurus that it's an awful thing to do. But if you actually try it, it's quite incredible. And you can look at things like the GAPS diet, you know, in Natasha Campbell-McBride's GAPS diet. I'm sure you come across that loads. Yeah. And in the early stages of that, basically, it's meat and bone broths. And if you look in the ancient texts in Ayurveda, they're saying meat is actually the most nourishing thing, when everybody who follows Ayurveda presumes it's sort of vegetarian, except the proper Ayurvedic doctors who know. And there's bone broths in there, and every culture has really known that this is the most healing thing. Is it the most healing thing to eat, or the best way to eat for everybody? I don't think so. I think if you're healthy, and if you're some hunter-gatherer who has his feet on the ground, and he doesn't have artificial light, and he isn't worrying about his mortgage, and he's not worrying that he should be like that poster up there, you know, he's just done whatever his ancestors have done, and he's going to find anything, and it doesn't matter a damn whether he eats a tuber out the ground or whatever he eats, because he's got the sunlight there to deplete the deuterium. We'll come on to that in a bit, but he's got everything going for him. And so he's perfect. He's eating all that stuff, and it's fine. And so then people go out and they find sort of like the Hadza tribe in Tanzania, and they go, oh, they've got the most diverse microbiome. We need microbiome like them. We must eat like them. And no, it's great for the Hadza, but what about up north? You know, and everybody's obsession with the Mediterranean diet. Why? It's great in the Med. Yeah, you know, it's probably better than eating McDonald's up here in the north of England or whatever, but it's not as good as eating what you would find in the north of England, which is far fewer vegetables and fruits at this time of year. Yeah, I think so anyway, it kind of shows that as you go from the north to the south, there's more fruits, there's more vegetables. You know, so eat it in the summer when it's available. This is why eating seasonally and eating locally. So no, I don't think that everybody should be a 100% carnivore, because if they're healthy and eating right for their location, they'll probably stay healthy. But if you do have some kind of mitochondrial problem, if you have some obesity, type 2 diabetes, if you have autoimmunity, then it's a very good idea, whatever your location is, to take the carbs down from even what somebody would naturally eat there, because it is an incredible way to reset. Zero carb, it's funny because I've looked on all these groups. I've looked on vegan groups, paleo groups, low carb groups, zero carb groups. I've been members of all of them. And any scientist is going to be listening to this now and go, oh, it's all hearsay. But actually, when you can see the thousands of stories, it's no longer really hearsay. You know, you can see this happening. And on the vegan groups, there is definitely some initial improvement, but then a lot of them are still on meds and saying, well, actually, this is incurable, and the docs, you know, tell us this. Okay. Then you get to the paleo people, and quite a lot of them are ex-vegetarians and vegans, and they come to that. And a lot of them who aren't very, very broken, they do really well. They get a lot better. But I think those sort of overload of sweet potatoes and bananas for people, particularly in the north, is not doing so much good. And then you get to the low carb people, and you see far more healing. But you get to the zero carb, and it's only something I've experienced recently. But wow, I mean, some of the people I'm seeing who are even down to a really good keto diet with lots of good leafy greens and nothing else, and fats and animal protein, some of the ones who actually go zero carb are making tremendous improvements even on top of that. And I felt that myself. And I think the two problems that people have are meat's really unhealthy because everybody says it is, and you can't get everything out of it. You need your veg. But actually you don't. If you really look at the science, you can get everything from meat. The only question is vitamin C, but you look at people who survive on an all meat diet, they never get scurvy. They just don't. So there's something else going on there. So vegetables, we need vegetables. Do we need vegetables? Well, eat them if you like them. They're great. They're great for soaking up loads of butter. They're delicious. You know, broccoli and loads of butter, it's great. Broccoli without butter, I don't think so. I don't like it very much. But the problem with veg is all of the nutrients in them are tied up with cellulose, which is pretty indigestible. And you see, I'm aiming this mostly at people who have digestive issues, but there's a wide range of that, from people who just get bloating, who have IBS, all the way through to Crohn's and autoimmunity. I'm talking mostly to people there now, where vegetables could well be your enemy, even the healthiest of veg, because they also have, they have glutens, they have lectins, they have salicylates, they have oxalates, and there's a lot of poisons. Plants don't want to be eaten. They have a lot of poisons that, so it locks in, and they could act as anti-nutrients to the nutrients that are already in there. The nutrients in meat are an awful lot more bioavailable. So, and then there's the myth of fiber. This is very irritating to a lot of people who have any gut issues, and you don't need it. You don't need it. There's a study somewhere on PubMed, actually, where they were trying to show about fiber, and so they took fiber out of the diets of people who had problems with their digestion, expecting to see a big problem, when actually everybody sorted themselves out. There might be some initial constipation as the electrolytes need to be rebalanced, but past that, I've never had such good digestion on zero fiber, zero carbs, only meat and fat, nothing else. And it's incredible. My guts are just heaven. And this is what I see over and over again. And all those people who've been on these diets for a long time posting blood results, and they're absolutely fantastic. Mm. And I can also see it, like when I was really ill, if occasionally I'd have some chocolate binge, and I didn't really have any reaction. It didn't feel that great, as it doesn't when you've eaten a load of sugar. But then if I ate something starchy, I'd have a load of reaction. And now I've seen it on a recent blog by Chris Kresser, and he was on about Klebsiella and how it affects ankylosing spondylitis, but there's, any arthritic condition really tied to the HLA-B27 antigen. And it carries those sugars and stuff, because it's bound up in cellulose. It carries it further down into the digestive system than it would do if you ate chocolate. So it's feeding the Klebsiella, which causes this reaction, which causes an autoimmune knock-on effect. And it's like, whoa, there we go. Once you've experienced it from the inside, you can see how it all works. And now with the deuterium thing that's coming out, I'll see if I can explain it quick. Well, deuterium is hydrogen has an extra isotope on it or something. The chemical side of it, I'm not up on, but it creates D2O instead of H2O. So you've got heavy water, you've got high deuterium water, and the cancer researchers have been on this for a long time. They realized that depleting people of deuterium, suddenly cancers disappear. My mum's 94. She had a horrible breast cancer. And it was like purple and lumpy and coming through the skin. I mean, I thought it was going to burst any time. We got her on a keto diet. We tried her on the cannabis oil, but she didn't like being stoned every day. She's 94. So we tailed that off. We got initial shrinkage of it. But then we couldn't do that anymore. It started to come back, and I got worried. We talked to the oncologist about it. We tried the pills, which just made her leg weak. She fell over and broke her wrist. So forget about that stuff. got her onto really overloading her an iodine protocol. And then it says that a few months later, quite often after you've done this and tailed off, then the magic happens. Now, I'd forgotten about it. I thought we'd failed. My mum said one day, it's almost gone away. And I thought, you know, has she had another stroke or something? She had one back in 96. Is this something she can't possibly have done? Let's have a look. Wow, it had. So I've got photographic evidence that this thing is disappearing. The skin's coming back to normal. It's amazing. And I talked to Jack about that, actually, and I can't forget, he knows the science, but he said it was also something to do with deuterium. So it's about iodine also helps with that along some pathway that is way beyond me. But that's probably how we did it too. But it's very good with hormonal things, you know, hormonal tumors and whatever in women. So anyway, the deuterium thing. So what's high in deuterium? Fruits, part of the reproductive cycle. Babies have a lot of deuterium around in the womb. It's great. It's for growth. If the body gets overloaded with deuterium when it's an adult, growth, what happens? Cancer. You know, it's the growth thing. It's beautiful. It's part of nature. It's great. But if you eat too many bananas in the north of England in the winter, you're not depleting the deuterium. What depletes deuterium? The cold, animal fats. Eat a lot of animal fats, and the cells start to make their own deuterium depleted water. Yeah, CT, cold thermogenesis, the sun, the main thing of all, the sun for depleting deuterium. Why does the fruit grow? And you can pick it off the trees and eat it fine. In season or down at the equator, you're out in the sun, you'll be fine. As long as you haven't already broken yourself somewhere up in the north, in which case it's best avoided anyway. But there's nothing wrong with fruit if you're some tribesman who comes across it. I'm not going to go out to the Serengeti and tell people to stop eating fruit. It's ridiculous. It's nature. But be aware that in the north of England, it's filling you up with deuterium. And unless you're doing a hell of a lot of CT every day and all sorts of other things, you're probably going to be battling against your own physiology. So it's a very simple thing about deuterium, which shows that why a lot of people who are on a high grain, high carbohydrate diets, very high deuterium. So these are the people who aren't clearing it in the north of England. You'll get sicker on a veggie diet in the north of England than you will down near the equator. So that's how the deuterium thing works. Not depleting it enough. And when you're broken mitochondrially, then there's no chance really of sorting anything out. So my friend Graham Norbury, he had a great analogy for it, where he said that deuterium in the cell is like some really fat guy stuck in a turnstile on the tube, so nobody else can get through. So all the people who could normally fit through won't get through. So I thought that was nice. That's kind of what's happening in the cell when there's too much deuterium. So, but I'm not getting any more scientific, because someone's going to pull me up on this. I just look at all this stuff to figure out what I already did, you know, and how it happened.
Yeah, no, I sometimes stop short of going real deep on the science, because, you know, I like practical things that help people and have real effects. And yeah, I want to read more into that though. That sounds interesting. I'm gonna have to.
It's a real fascinating one.
Yeah,
really,
I'll have to dive deeper.
Some of Jack's stuff. There's some stuff he's done on Patreon that will blow your mind, I think. But yeah, there's a lot of people on about it. There's a guy called Dr. Q, I think his name is. Sounds like a James Bond villain, doesn't it? QUE. And he's been working with cancer patients for years with deuterium depleted water. In different grades for getting rid of this, and he's talking about that too. But you see, he also says that the leafy green veg is also deuterium depleted, because this is how a plant does it, you know, with connected all to photosynthesis and stuff. You see, I'm just making an idiot of myself now. But so the leaves are good for that. They're great. But with somebody who's already really broken, where the gut's an issue, the leaves can be a problem because of all the aforementioned fiber and anti-nutrients. So that's the only reason I think the veg are no good for some people. So, but I think the only thing I try and get across when I go on about this carnivore thing is that it is safe. You know, give it a go. If you're really broken, you haven't tried everything, honestly, just try 30 days, like Sean Baker says with his World Carnivore Month. Just try 30 days and you will be really surprised. You might have a week or two of feeling horrendous, like you do with any keto diet.
Yeah.
But after that, wow, yeah, extraordinary things can happen.
And do you say to people just go cold turkey straight in?
Everyone's different, aren't they? You know, it took me years, and I was almost completely zero carb by the time I went into it. And even then, I noticed tremendous benefits from just being, you know, incredibly low carb. Just cutting those last few veg, you know, a few bits of broccoli here and there, I noticed a great difference. But again, I'm like everybody else, only more so. So do I notice it more than other people? I don't know. Maybe I've just been listening to the body without so much. But a load of people go cold turkey and they're fine, and some have no problems, and some do. But usually just like any keto diet, it's a matter of, you know, taking some Himalayan salt in some water in the morning, and taking some magnesium in, having some Epsom salt baths, getting the electrolytes sorted, and then it stops that whole keto flu thing. Yeah. And a lot of people who get constipated, maybe they're not drinking enough water, and they're not taking in enough fat, and that can help. But after a month or so, everybody seems to be online with that. It's just people give up and go, oh, I got really constipated. But there's also a little bit of a myth about that, because I remember, you know, they go on about transit times, and when you eat all this fiber and out it comes really fast. And I remember that. But now you don't actually pass so much, because there's so many nutrients in meat and not a load of useless fiber. It doesn't get stuck in the gut. It just takes a while to go through, because the body's going, ooh, lovely. You know, I mean, we've got all these nutrients. We don't have to fight for them, and then get rid of all that fiber because it's irritating us and creating diverticulitis and whatever. So, yeah, you pass less quite often, but it's fine. If there's no bloating and there's no pain, it's not a problem constipated. Some people only go for a poo every 3 days, and that's fine. I don't. I go every day. I have great bowels. They're brilliant, and everything's fine, and most people are. But if you only go 3 days, and you have every 3 days, and you have absolutely no discomfort on a carnivore diet, nothing wrong. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of that happens to a lot of people. The transit time is slower, but it all comes out. It's all passed, and there really is no problem. I sincerely believe that most of the ailments that fiber is supposed to cure, it actually causes.
Okay. So speaking to somebody, let's say someone's watching this who's got a standard Western country diet of potatoes, vegetables, probably still eating gluten and things like that. And they're starting to think, maybe there's something in this. I'm going to start eating some more meat, more bone broth, that kind of thing. What would you say about them if they've got worries about raising cholesterol?
Yeah. Well, I honestly, I did a talk a while ago. There's a lovely doc near me called Joanne McCormack, and she's discovered all this whole low carb thing. She's doing great things with her patients. And, you know, diabetes meds just go straight in the bin, don't they? Diabetes is a pretty easy one on the low carb thing. And I did a talk with her, and she had a few other people talking, like David Unwin from Southport, who's great, who's doing the same thing. And also Malcolm Kendrick. Have you heard of a book called The Great Cholesterol Con?
I've been reading Malcolm's blog, yeah.
Yeah, he was there. He's a great character. He was fun. And he's very outspoken against it. And honestly, I think the whole cholesterol thing is nonsense. I think it's nonsense to just sell a load of statins, because, yeah, I think, you see, sometimes cholesterol goes up, sometimes it goes down. I heard a great thing the other day where it said cholesterol causes heart disease in the same way as paramedics cause car accidents. Mm-hmm. You know, they're present at the scene, yeah, but they're mopping stuff up and they're doing what they're supposed to do. So if you take the cholesterol out, well, there's a problem.
Yeah.
So, yes, initially on these keto diets and these carnivore diets, the LDL can spike. But are they testing for the different particle size? Are they testing for the large particles, which are absolutely fine? Or you know, and it is, on one of those diets, it's great. I remember seeing a TV program where I think somebody went to Tim Noakes after he had, it was a runner anyway, he was very fit, healthy, but he had a history of heart attacks in his family, and he went very low carb, and his LDL spiked, and his doctor went, oh, this is a bit dangerous. And then he went to Tim Noakes, I think it was, and Tim Noakes went, excellent, this is just what we want to see. Because it's fine. This is what's happening in this process. And you have to just have faith in it, I guess, and educate yourself that really the whole cholesterol thing was nonsense. And if you want to see from those readings whether there's a problem, I think it's much better to look at the whole CRP thing and the inflammation levels. the ratio of HDL to triglycerides. You know, if that's like 1 to 1 or thereabouts, then you're fine. If the LDL spikes for a bit, honestly, it's probably the big particles. And just say to your doc, well, okay, is that the big or small particles? And he'll probably scratch his head and go, we don't test for that. You go, oh, well, you know, how many people have been put off at that stage? It's a shame.
Yeah.
Because it's only out of a lack of proper education, I think. Yeah.
How regularly have you monitored your inflammatory markers throughout your journey?
Yes, up to a certain point, but only up to about 2012, 2013. Because honestly, I have no use for rheumatologists. Yeah. You know, the last time I went to one, he got so angry with me for suggesting that I might have done this on my own that he started shouting at me, properly shouting at me that I was going to get, I was going to go into my lungs and my heart. I really need to take the meds. And I said, but look at me, I'm the most healthy one in your waiting room. And I only came along because the appointment came up. And he was getting very, very angry. And so I have a friend now who is under him. And she came to one of my Ancestral Health awareness meetings that I used to call them. And she's lovely. And she came in and tipped a pile of meds on the table. And I said, so how's it going with Sati? She'd started with him just about when I left. She said, well, I've still got the psoriatic arthritis, but now I've got diabetes, I've got IBS, I'm on antidepressants, blah, blah, blah. There was a load of things. And I thought, you're doing pretty well there, you know, under this chap. So anyway, it just shows to me it must be a thankless sort of profession. And I don't really, at some point I might, if somebody comes up to me and says at a talk, I'm doing a talk on the 15th of March, I think, in Blackpool, to a load of health professionals. And if somebody comes up and says, hey, I'd love to test you or something, you're very welcome. But I did see it go really down. But my CRP was horrendous. It was like, I forget which was which. SED rate and CRP, one was 65 and one was 85. But my God, that's enormous. It's supposed to be less than 1. Whichever one it was, I was on fire. And I saw them come way down, you know, to like, I think the last time I saw it was about 6 or something. But that was years ago.
Sure.
So now, with how I feel, I would expect it's very low. But I don't know, because I don't test it, because honestly, I think that the sort of people who are looking for that kind of test are not very open-minded, if you see what I mean. You know, if you have to give somebody a page with figures on, what about the fact that I can run around and I can play drums now? You know, I don't know.
Treat the person, not the values and the ranges.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the whole system, isn't it? It's all set up to give someone a label, and then it's medication for life, really. You know, anyone who's going down that conventional medical route and listens to their consultants, you know, I don't see any of them really turning their health around. It's empowering yourself with knowledge and information like you have that leads to health recoveries. That's
the lovely feeling, is taking control of it. Because I used to be, I think I did a blog post on my website about being a hypochondriac. You know, that you're actually thinking the right way, you're just facing in the wrong direction. I used to be, every little thing, a twinge, oh my God, this is this, or there's a lump, oh my God, that's cancer. You know, there's so much fear.
Yeah.
In the whole health thing of you're going to get this, you're going to get that, and it's out of your control. But when you actually see the things that cause it, because when we first get ill, we go to the doc, and then we start looking for herbal remedies and pills, you know, which can have their place. But I think I always see it as polishing a car. You need to hose the mud off first.
Yeah.
You need to take away all the stuff that's causing all of this. That old joke that it takes a lot of aspirin to take away the pain if you're sitting on a drawing pin. You know, get off the drawing pin. So all of these influences that in our lives that cause these problems, the emotional, the spiritual, the environmental, the EMFs, the light is huge. You know, I think light is well, it governs everything. It takes the mystery out of diet. If you're not got your circadian rhythms in sync, nothing's going to work. No diet's going to really work. You're going to notice some improvements, but it's not going to really work. We always have orange shades on now. Blue blocking shades after dark. Candles go on. If a screen's on, the shades go on.
Yeah,
it makes a huge difference to sleep, quality of sleep, everything. I wouldn't be without them now. So yeah, so apologies if anyone's watching and the light's going down now. It's in England, it's in the winter, and I'm not going to put any lights on, because as it stops coming through the window, I'm just going to start disappearing. But yeah, that's what's going on. So yeah, I think the light and everything. So when you can see all of these things, you lose your fear. You know, you've taken back control of your health, and the fear's gone, the hypochondria goes, and now when you get a symptom, you go, oh, interesting. You know, there's no fear with it. You say, what am I doing wrong? What can I take away from my lifestyle that will help this?
Yeah. Okay. We're probably going to need to round this up a little bit, Phil. So, and the light's going, so time to get off the blue light. What's next for you, do you feel, in terms of spreading your message?
I'd like to do a load of public speaking. I just love speaking to people, and then have people come up at the end, sort of minds blown, hostile, anything. You know, it's lovely just interacting with people. It's great fun on the internet and doing consultations over Skype, which I do, or whatever, and that's lovely, and Facebook groups and all this sort of thing. It's brilliant for people, but I do love interacting with people, and I think it's not just me. I mean, there's a whole load of people out there who have the most extraordinary info to impart. I'm unique in that I've studied, well, not unique by any means, but in that I've written a book, I've fixed myself, and I understand a little bit about it. But there are other people out there, whether they've been sick or not, who understand a hell of a lot more about it than I do. And they're spreading the message for free. And it would be lovely to see some way that when this becomes mainstream, we can help people out by getting into their houses and doing home visits. That's great for me, you know, going through people's cupboards, going shopping with them, things like that. It's loads of fun. And then leading them into the other stuff. I don't think diet's the most important thing. We've been talking mostly about diet, but I do talk about it more. And Jack has a go at me sometimes for talking too much about diet, because he goes, I'm never talking about it anymore. The world needs more light gurus and fewer diet gurus. Well, the thing is that, number one, it's most people's first entry point into it.
Yeah.
And number two, there's so much dogma built up about it. If you say to somebody, actually, blue light's pretty bad, you know, if it goes in through the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus and ruins all the body clocks in your body, and they can see that. They go, oh yeah, that's interesting. Because nobody's told them since they were a kid, you have to have your face buried in blue light. It's important. It's good for your health, and it's good for your digestion. Nobody's told them that, so they don't have loads of stuff to unwind. The problem is unwinding stuff. So talking about diet all this time is unwinding stuff. So I realized how long it took me to unwind. How many people watching this, they watch this and think, this idiot's saying you should eat only meat? You know, I understand you. Believe me, I do. But it's worth going on about, because it's probably the most difficult one to fix for most people, because they've got so many weird ideas from so many places.
Yeah.
Everyone's an expert. So yeah, to be able to get past that, so it's accepted for the mainstream to stop putting some heading on the Daily Mail, oh, actually, saturated fat isn't so bad. And then the next day they go, oh, statins are great. You know, so it's all confusing, and it's little nuggets of truth buried in nonsense. You've seen these diet programs recently. Don't you shout at the telly? You've got,
I don't watch them, but...
I would watch them, and now I've given up. And then occasionally somebody goes, oh, watch one, and you're like, oh no, there's one good thing in there, and it's buried among a load of nonsense. Nobody's going to pick out that one good thing. So it's very difficult to be just busting myths. I love the busting of myths, and I'm really not saying I've discovered the truth. I've discovered what I've discovered now by letting go of all the other stuff I've learned. So maybe I'll discover far better stuff, and as I do, I'll also put that on to other people as well, because I just seem to love talking about it. So yeah, I'll stand up. I've got some speaking stuff coming up, and interviews and things like that, and I love doing it. It's great fun, so I can waffle on for ages about it, and so I might as well do it since I love it.
Well, I love your passion and enthusiasm for the subject. You know, I think everybody else would have felt that today as well, and anybody who watches this in the future. So I'm sure just let them know if they want to connect with you further and where they can pick up your books. The URL of your website is
Yeah, it's pureactivity.net is my website, and the YouTube channel's under my own name. There's a few things on there. If anybody's interested who's watching this with autoimmunity, there's other things that I cover. I've done a video, it's about half an hour long. I sat there at my lake and videoed it when I was catching absolutely nothing as usual. It was 10 tips for reversing autoimmunity, the things that I found the most powerful when I was healing. Also, have a look at my Facebook group, which is 100% Carnivore and Beyond. Now, it isn't all about meat eating. We get into the whole deuterium thing. There's some amazing people on there. There's Paul Mabry, who is a zero carb doc, who's very fascinating. He's got his own group too, and great website and blog. Jack's obviously active on there, and he's always controversial. And a lot of very cool people. Sean Baker, who started World Carnivore Month, who's got these records as over 50 of all the lifting and stuff. So it clearly does muscle tone no harm at all. And yeah, so pureactivity.net. Look me up on Facebook under my own name, and YouTube channel, and Twitter, and all the usual stuff. So
awesome. Thank you for your time today, Phil. We got there in the end with technology.
We did, yes. Yeah, it was crazy, wasn't it? So yeah, it was lovely to talk to you, and thank you so much for asking me onto the show.
No problem at all. That's great, Phil. Take care, and yeah, we'll turn the lights off now.
Cool.
In England.
See you then. Bye. Yeah.